that it's only August 2nd and we're on practice 8. It just feels like everything started early. So, you see it's August 2nd. It's like going on a 4,000-mile road trip and being told you have 3,900 miles to get to the actual destination. But so far, so good. I'm sure everybody's ready to at least get to preseason games. That's coming soon enough, at least.
And we got a little taste of that preseason with the Hall of Fame game last night. Right now, we are right at the midway point of 49ers training camp. So before we get started with practice number 8 today, we want to go through the biggest storylines of training camp. We're going to start with year 3 progress for Brock Purdy, that cornerback competition, and also the 49ers' new look on the defensive line. So we had pads come on Monday. What immediately happened to the intensity here at practice?
Yeah, I think every player kind of views that as the first benchmark of training camp of like, hey, this is actual football now. This is our opportunity to get back to it. One thing that I think is interesting that you can note from these early practices is there's a lot more vet days for guys than there used to be. Kyle Juszczyk was just talking the other day. He's in year 12, had his first vet day ever. So you see guys like Nick Bosa and Christian McCaffrey who usually get those, but you get Javon Hargrave getting days off here and there. So there's things like that are happening, and I think that is a product of the fact that this is a team where a lot of the big-name guys who've been around have played deep into the season 4 or 5 years in a row, and that takes a toll, and I think they need to manage those guys a little bit more. So you're seeing some of that kind of pop up here early. It is good to see them in pads because at least you can finally start evaluating things a little bit better. Coach Kyle Shanahan even said it. It was funny because Chris Furster, the offensive line coach, said, I don't love the one-on-ones. Everybody makes too big a deal out of them. I'm one of those people. But Kyle Shanahan said, I love it because it's a chance to finally get a look at these guys, see how they do when it's going to be like a real game.
And you make a really great point. This is a team that has had an extensive playoff run, 4 out of the 5 last seasons. And we've heard players, head coach Kyle Shanahan, talk about it, that the offseason felt just a little bit shorter than it normally does. So let's start with the offense. Brock Purdy, year 3, and believe it or not, this is the first healthy offseason that he's enjoying since becoming the starting quarterback here. What does this training camp allow Brock Purdy to do that he hasn't had an opportunity to do in years past?
I think the thing you're seeing the most of with Brock Purdy is just a comfort level that I don't want to say he hasn't been comfortable, but I think he's very comfortable now. And Brian Griese talked about it in the spring that he challenged Brock Purdy. I want to see more of that leadership from you. I want you to step forward into that role. When you're QB1, you have to do that anyway, but Brock Purdy needs to take another step forward in that area. And I think he's doing it because he was here in the spring. He was on the field, not just in meetings like last year, when he had the elbow issue. He was in meetings, which is great, but being able to come out here and translate it and direct a huddle and command guys, you're seeing him chirp at guys a little bit more than you have in the past. And also just from a physical standpoint, he worked on his lower base. Kyle Shanahan called it what, baby Bosa? Quads? Quads anyway, I think is what it was. So, he's a little stronger, and I think you're seeing a little bit more zip on his passes. But for me, I don't worry about all the training camp stats and all that stuff. This is a team that knows who their quarterback is. Yes, finally we know who the quarterback is. There was no doubt about that the whole offseason. I think it set Brock Purdy up with an opportunity to really step into that QB1 leadership role and take over this team and make it his. And I think you're seeing signs of that early on.
I asked head coach Kyle Shanahan on report day, turn back the clock a year ago, Brock Purdy was still not fully recovered from his UCL injury. And I just asked him, how does this experience feel a little bit different? And he said, nice, cool, and it takes a lot of the uncertainty out of it. Like you said, what does that do for the mindset of the rest of the team, all the weapons around Brock Purdy, to have had all that offseason time with him?
I think it's exhausting for everyone. It's exhausting for fans. It's exhausting for media, and it's definitely exhausting for them when you're going through quarterback drama every offseason. And so to go through a whole season this offseason of not having to worry about that, there's plenty of other things to worry about, of course. You have a lot of first world problems here in San Francisco these days, but when you're able to kind of go through that and know who your guy is, and really someone that Kyle Shanahan clearly trusts, and he trusts him from the very beginning. There were signs very early on. I wrote a big story about it last playoffs of things that Kyle Shanahan saw in Brock Purdy as far back as that, his rookie season. That Seattle game was when they kind of knew he was going to be the guy, and I think that really instills a lot of confidence in his teammates too, where they don't have to worry about it. They can go work with Brock Purdy, say in the offseason, and say, this is the guy who I'm going to be catching passes from. So you get a little bit more of that comfortability in terms of just getting timing down and all those things that might take longer in a training camp setting if you don't have that.
So while the offense did have a lot of its core players returning, the defense had quite a bit of turnover from 2023 to 2024. I want to zero in on that cornerback room. A lot of new faces there. Isaac Yiadom was brought in from the Saints, and we had Rock Ya-Sin coming in from the Ravens. We had Renardo Green be drafted in the second round. Who has been an early standout for you?
Well, I'm going to start with somebody who's been here, actually, but I think is ready to take that next step, and he's kind of showed signs of it last year in Diamador Lenore. I could make an argument as we stand here right now, Lindsey, that Diamador Lenore has been one of the three best players on the field, regardless of position, throughout this camp. He's just beaming with confidence. He had the year last year that I think he always felt like he could have. You know, he made it a point after the season previous to last year, like, hey, I need to really do better in terms of tracking the deep ball. Some of the things that were, you know, kind of sticking in his craw a little bit that he wanted to get better at, and he did it. And I think as he enters this year, he's entering a contract year again. The Niners lead the league in first world problems here. They got a lot of good players they got to take care of. It is. It's official too. I checked with stats and information on that. But Diamador Lenore is playing really well, and I think he's in a really good position. But to answer your question in terms of how everything else is going to, I think Isaac Yiadom is the guy who, even as far back as the spring, kind of stood out as like, this is a veteran guy. He's been around. He's kind of been up and down. John Lynch said he noticed a lot of things that were similar in his path in terms of just kind of finding his footing and really understanding what it takes to succeed on defense and not just special teams. So I think he's got the inside track in terms of being that third corner. Diamador Lenore, Charvarius Ward are your top two corners regardless. That needs to be made very clear here. But when you go into nickel packages, Diamador Lenore bumps inside. Isaac Yiadom's on the outside. I think Renardo Green is the guy that they're hoping can kind of be that fourth guy. And then you got guys like Darrell Luter, who they're still hoping to develop. But I think that's kind of how it's shaking out right now. And you hear the guys saying it, this is as deep a group as they've had in a long time. It's the deepest group of corners that I've seen the Niners have since I started covering the team in 2017.
You talk about Diamador Lenore taking that next step. You also bring in assistant head coach Brandon Staley, who's been working a lot one-on-one with Lenore. What can he bring to his game?
Yeah, it's funny that the Brandon Staley discussion is interesting because, you know, he obviously didn't work out for him as a head coach, but he didn't forget how to coach football, right? Like he's kind of able to take a step back here and get back to basics, which a lot of coaches, the guys who really love coaching, will tell you the thing they like the most is teaching. And you see it here every day in practice. Right out in that corner over there, you'll see Diamador Lenore and Brandon Staley just one-on-one stuff. And Diamador Lenore called Brandon Staley a genius the other day, and he was talking about the different ways that he's helped him out so far. And I asked Diamador, I said, what are the things that he's doing that maybe is helping you or that you haven't seen? And he talked about how, like, just percentage-wise, Brandon Staley can give him information that he doesn't know about. So, for example, the example he used was they're not going to throw a fade 80% of the time or whatever it is, right? So he can play a certain technique and a certain coverage knowing that a certain route isn't going to come in a certain down and distance. So just little things like that where he can give guys a little bit of an edge that maybe takes away the thinking aspect of it when the ball is snapped and they can just kind of play free.
Let's move on to that defensive line. 4 notable additions. We've got 2 defensive tackles in Jordan Elliott and Malik Collins. Then you bring in a guy like Yetur Gross-Matos who can play inside and outside. And then, of course, a very talented and proven veteran in Leonard Floyd. What does the 49ers' new D-line look like in terms of being a formidable force?
Yeah, I think specifically on the edge, this is a team that has been looking for the right tag team partner for Nick Bosa on the opposite edge, really since Dee Ford was here. Obviously, the Dee Ford signing, when those two were healthy, that D-line was as dominant as any group in the league, but that he just wasn't healthy enough. And so they obviously weren't able to work that out. And then they've been kind of searching. The thing with Leonard Floyd is he's going to give you nonstop effort. And the most amazing thing about Leonard Floyd is guy doesn't miss time.
He's always available.
I don't have wood to knock on, but like I just don't even know if it matters because he's always on the field. I mean, the very first practice of this training camp, Leonard Floyd limps off early on. Everyone's thinking, oh, they're just going to shut him down. They'll play it safe. He came back like 10 minutes later. So it's like this guy, it means a lot to him to be on the field and be available for his team every week. So just having someone that they can count on, someone that's dependable, someone who can clean things up when Nick Bosa creates a pressure and isn't going to give up on a play, I think that's as good a fit as they could possibly find for what money they had available. And then on the inside, you have Malik Collins, Jordan Elliott. I think they're both going to kind of play different roles. Collins more of a pass rusher, Elliott a little bit more of a run stuffing type, trying to replace Eric Armstead. So that's a big task. And I think we saw in the playoffs the run defense wasn't where they wanted it to be. The hope is that those guys can help them kind of get back to that place. That remains to be seen. Eric Armstead was an excellent run defender on the inside, and Javon Hargrave too came back in better shape. He was very clearly disappointed in his performance last season. He looks like he's motivated to kind of get back to the level that he was and live up to that contract.
At this point in training camp, it is typical that the defenses are a little bit ahead of the offense. And one thing I know that was an emphasis for this 49ers team is you wanted the secondary and the front seven to really be tied together. What good things have you seen coming out of the unit as a whole?
Well, when people talk about interceptions in training camp, they always talk about the quarterback throwing it. But the other side of that is somebody's got to be.
The defense
it's
is making a play.
the team coming up with the interceptions. And so I think you've seen here, especially in this past week, kind of a flurry once pads came on of takeaways. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that pass rush and the back end are a little bit more tied together. And really hiring Nick Sorensen, Kyle Shanahan made it very clear it was just trying to get back to basics, for lack of a better term. Get back to the fundamentals of who they want to be, which is a largely cover 3 defense, rush 4, blitz sparingly, not a lot, pick your spots, of course, and then mix coverages a little bit, or at least disguise coverages a little bit better on the back end. And I think you're seeing signs of that. It's not really surprising. Nick Sorensen, even just from the first time we met him in press conference to now, seems a lot more comfortable in his role. And some of that role is talking to schlubs like me, but he definitely feels more comfortable in this setting. And I think you're seeing that part of that is the fact that he's able to just kind of get into a groove and be doing his job out here on a day-to-day basis.
Well, Nick, we're in the dog days of summer. It's real hot out here. We're about to get into the second half of training camp. What would you like to see in these next block of practices?
Well, the number one thing is the obvious thing, which is people to stay healthy. Get healthy and stay healthy. That's, I think, the number one thing for any training camp. But honestly, for this team, I hate to say this because it just is what it is. This team, it's all about January and February. And I know that's stating the obvious, but when they've been as deep as they have into the postseason, it is really just a function of can they get there and get over the hump. And they're certainly good enough to do so. I don't think anyone would question that. But they're in a situation right now, even just the other day, offensive line banged up, wide receiver banged up. Just get healthy, get through this camp, figure out what you have. Because I think if you have this team where you have those 11 guys, you have your entire offense coming back, they have a chance to be outstanding. If the defense can get back up to a level where it was 2 years ago, then you might have that perfect marriage that you've been looking for to finally get over the hump.
All right, well, the music is coming on. Our players are starting to walk out, so we are going to wrap up this 49ers live look-in. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll have another one of these when we're down in Irvine for joint practices.